Welcome back, everybody, to another segment of the Educational AD Podcast. We'll be right back with today's guest, but as always, we're going to give a shout out to our sponsors. Now, don't hit that fast forward button. You've heard me say before, these are all companies that I used as an athletic director. They're all great companies. You should be using them too. So take 3 minutes, listen to our shout outs, then listen to our interview. Then go and visit these sponsors. I'm telling you, you're going to be glad you did. We want to say thanks to our good friends at Snap Raise for their support. Have you ever spent weeks and weeks with a fundraiser and been disappointed in the results? Well, those days are gone. Go to snapraise.com. It's hands down the best online fundraiser out there. We used it at our school with great success. Our coaches loved it. Our parents loved it because it works. Go to snapraise.com. You can check out their other great platforms. But if you're looking for a fundraiser, you just found it. Go to snapraise.com. We want to thank Home Campus. You've heard me say before, Home Campus is a platform you will use every single day, whether it's scheduling, rosters, results. Their student athlete eligibility and clearance platform alone is worth the price. For more information, just go to homecampus.com. Don't forget to mention the podcast. That's homecampus.com. We want to say thank you to our friends at Gipper. You know, your students are on social media, and if they're not seeing content that celebrates their accomplishments and promotes your program, you're missing out on a great opportunity. Go to Gipper.com. It's used and trusted by over 20,000 programs, both high school and college, and it's professional graphic design made easy. Whether it's a simple post about a game highlight or a score, or a complete newsletter about all the great things happening in your program, the team at Gipper will have you creating world-class content in seconds. That's Gipper.com. We also want to thank Vital Signs Wall of Fame. If you're looking for a really cool way to display your school record boards for all the teams, for all the different events, or to show off your school's Hall of Fame, go to Vital Signs Wall of Fame and take a look at their interactive touchscreen video consoles. It's also a great way to share your school's unique history and brag a little bit about your proudest moments. The website is vitalsignswalloffame.com. Check them out today. We want to say thank you to Huddle. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but when I became an athletic director, I made sure our school was a Huddle school, and our coaches just loved the tools that Huddle provided. Our student athletes loved the videos, and our parents loved the streaming, but there is so much more. Go to huddle.com, join the 8 million users, and turn your school into a Huddle school. We'd like to thank Ohio University and their online master's in athletic administration. Now, I didn't get my master's at Ohio University, but my assistant athletic director did, and it was a great experience. It's very affordable, just 20 months, totally online. And while you're completing your master's degree, you're also completing 11 NIAAA leadership training courses at no extra charge. To get more information, just go to ohio.edu/info/MAA, the Ohio University Online Masters in Athletic Administration. We want to thank Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables, and video boards. Go to sidelineinteractive.com and schedule a live web demo to see their score tables and their score boards in action. Probably one of the best purchases I ever made was our Sideline Interactive indoor score table. Go to sidelineinteractive.com and find out how to get one in your gym today. We want to say thanks to Hometown Ticketing. Hometown is the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. I don't think I need to say anything more. Go to hometownticketing.com for more information. Let them know you heard about it on the podcast. Whether it's more support, more security, or more customization, Hometown is here to help you make the best online ticketing solution. And we'd like to thank Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack. Athletic directors already get feedback, but a lot of times it's from a very small group that just wants to complain. Athletic Surveys will connect you to that group, which is important, but they're also going to connect you to the 98% of your stakeholders that support your program. And having that positive feedback, that positive data is incredibly valuable, especially when you're visiting with a frustrated parent or maybe your principal or even your school board. Go to athleticsurveys.com. They're going to create a custom survey that lets you take the pulse of everybody in your program. That's athleticsurveys.com. Welcome back, everybody, to another segment of the Educational AD Podcast. We've got an old friend with us. She's been on the podcast a couple of times, and she's back again. Um, Regular listeners will remember the name Jan Murphy. Jan's incredible background. She's a Hall of Famer. She's a college athlete, career coach, and now she has started her own podcast. We're going to hear about that and more. But Jan Murphy, welcome back to the Educational AD Podcast.
Jake, thanks for having me back.
Oh, no, absolutely. Thanks for taking time to talk with our listeners. Um, we're going to hear about, Jan's, athletic career and her coaching career and everything. But the name of her podcast is called the Title IX Time Machine, looking back and moving forward. Jan was a true Title IX pioneer. She was in junior high and high school in 1972 when Title IX was first enacted, and has firsthand experience as a student athlete, a collegiate athlete, even pre-NCAA days at a Division I school, and then a 40-year career as a teacher, as a coach, as a leader. In education. And we're going to hear about that. But Jan, as you were talking to me, and the reason that you felt called to do this podcast, you wanted to do it, you felt you needed to do it. I just think is such a great story. Can you share with our listeners how that all came to be? Why did you feel you had to start this podcast?
Well, thanks for asking that question. So recently I was at a cross country race. I'm a cross country official. It was an NC2A race. And I have this Title IX pin on my hat. And this girl points at it and says, "What is that for?" And I said, "You don't know what Title IX is?" She goes, "No." And so I'm telling her what it is and how it came about. And then a couple other runners come over and they are saying the same thing. And as I was talking to people my age, they were shocked that these young ladies didn't know what people before them had gone through to pave the way for them to be able to do what they're doing now. And I thought it was important that we share stories like mine so those younger athletes can see what the legacy is and what they have to keep going for the future.
Oh, yeah. And again, I guess these were all Division I athletes, cross country runners at this championship meet, and they had never heard of Title IX. I think that's, um, I guess it's sad, but it's also, kind of good that the one girl actually asked you, hey, what is that? And then the other athletes, came and listened and found were the girls, what was their response as you were kind of telling them maybe a little bit of your experience, of the Title IX experience? Was there shock, appreciation, or did you even get that far?
Well, I didn't share this with you earlier, but the last meet that I was at, I was talking with a bunch of volunteers and they also asked about my pin and I said, "Well, it's about Title IX." And they're like, "What?" And so I told them about how I got started as an athlete and what my experiences were, and they were shocked, unbelieving. They could not believe there wasn't a girls' cross country team. They couldn't believe that women had to do this. They couldn't believe that it wasn't always the way it was. I said, "Well, maybe you want to listen to my podcast. There's some stories that you might want to hear."
All right, I love it. We're going to take our first break, but when we come back, I'm going to ask Jan to share her Title IX experience. And again, I've heard it, but it is incredible, and you really need to pay attention. So let's take that break, but we're coming back with more. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to say thanks to our good friends at Snap Raise for their support. Have you ever spent weeks and weeks with a fundraiser and been disappointed in the results? Well, those days are gone. Go to snapraise.com. It's hands down the best online fundraiser out there. We used it at our school with great success. Our coaches loved it, our parents loved it because it works. Go to snapraise.com. You can check out their other great platforms. But if you're looking for a fundraiser, you just found it. Go to snapraise.com. Don't forget to mention the podcast, snapraise.com. We also want to say thanks to our friends at Home Campus.
Off.
Now, Home Campus is a platform that you're going to use every single day, whether it's scheduling, results, rosters, communication. Their student athlete eligibility and clearance platform alone is worth the price. Go to homecampus.com for more information. That's it, homecampus.com. You're going to be very glad you did. Welcome back, everybody, to the Educational AD Podcast and our guest, Jan Murphy, longtime coach and teacher and the host of a brand new podcast of her own called the Title IX Time Machine. Jan was, again, in there at the very beginning, 1972. And Jan, if you could share with our listeners that experience that I think for you actually started as a junior high athlete because your school was like 7, 8, 9 junior high, and then the high school was 10, 11, 12. What was that experience like for you from the athletic Title IX experience?
Well, in junior high school, I was not aware really of the discrepancies. I was a gymnast and we had a gymnastics team, and I felt kind of blessed to do that. But when I went back to do a little research for the podcast, looking at my yearbook, I saw in junior high school, we had cheerleading and gymnastics. There were 6 or 8 cheerleaders and 24 girls on the gymnastics team. There were 5 sports for boys, including track, baseball, wrestling, football, and basketball. And moving forward, those boys still had those sports. When I went into high school, it was 1972, and we didn't have gymnastics in high school. So they let the ninth graders be JV and actually participate at the junior high level for that year. But as those girls got older, there was no varsity team, and the program just kind of died. I went out for track my sophomore year. I was a pretty good athlete, just like in PE and stuff, and I really liked to run, and I was pretty good at it. And so in the fall, I wanted to run cross country. And when I went out for the team, I was told, well, we don't have a girls' team. And I can remember thinking about that for a little bit. And then I went, well, wait a minute. This is Title IX. I get my team. So I went to the coach and I just said, hey, if you don't have a girls' team, then that means I can run on the boys' team. And so he let me. But unfortunately, I beat too many of his runners. And he decided, wait a minute, let's have a girls' team. So he told me, you can have a girls' team. You can ride the bus. We'll figure out a uniform for you. But you got to have 5 runners every week so you can score. So I literally got 4 different people to run with me each week. And that time, cross country was, I'm from Oregon, in a sheep field or dust field or through the forest. Some girls just didn't like that. So every week I had to find some new friends. We ran district that year. We had a pretty good season. Wasn't officially recognized, um, but that spring we had a great track season, about 12 distance runners, and those girls all came out my senior year. Our cross country team won the district, and I think we placed 6th at state that year. So it was a very interesting beginning for my athletic career and my Title IX experiences.
Wow, what a turnaround from no team to, placing, I mean, that's, medaling, 6th place at state. That's great. And Oregon, that's a track and field cross country, mecca. I want to go back to that conversation that you had with the boys cross country coach. I mean, do you remember? Um, I mean, you were just saying, "Hey, I want to run. Let's have a girls team." And he said, "No." Was it his idea to run on the boys team, or did you come up with that idea?
I think I was pretty stubborn, and at that time, can I tell a little tangent story? So I can remember in sixth grade, we weren't allowed to wear pants to school. And so the group of girls that I grew up with, we staged a protest and we all wore pants to school in sixth grade and we all got sent home. So we had that mentality. And so when he said I couldn't, we didn't have a team, you can't run, I really think he thought I would say, okay, I'll just go do a girl sport. Um, but I'm 4'10". I'm not going to play volleyball. So I was like, no, I'm a good runner. I want to try it. And I was kind of insistent. And I saw him in August this year, and he every time I see him in the summertime, he always says to me, "You were that girl who was really insistent on having a team." He's kind of old now, but I also think back then, when you're in high school, you don't really know how old your teachers are. I think he might have been a new teacher also and didn't really have any idea what he was supposed to do. Um, and I didn't really get a lot of help. We had one female PE teacher. She really wasn't interested. And I really felt like they're like, well, if we just give enough obstacles in her way, she'll just quit. That's kind of not my personality. And it kind of made me push harder, which I did.
What I know I'm putting you on the spot here. What's a more vibrant memory for you? Beating some of those boys in those early races, or seeing the girls program grow and end up placing at state your senior year? There's no wrong answer here.
Definitely seeing the team grow. That has been my legacy throughout my coaching career is to develop teams and create team bonds. I mean, I have relationships with kids that I coached in 19 still that I just were like family. And I really think that made a difference. And those girls on that very first team, I'm in contact with several of them still today.
Wow, that's great. Great story. We're going to take another break. Our guest today is Jan Murphy, Title IX pioneer, career coach, and educator. Let's take that break, but we're coming back with more. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We also want to say thank you to Gipper. Um, Go to Gipper.com. Their team is going to have you creating world-class content in seconds, and it's so easy, even I can do it. Your students are on social media, so are a lot of their parents. And if they're not seeing content that celebrates their accomplishments and promotes your program, you're missing out on a great opportunity. Gipper's used and trusted by over 20,000 programs across the country. And again, it could be a social media post acknowledging a win or a score. It could be a weekly newsletter that's promoting all the great aspects of your program. You'll find it all at Gipper. And again, their team will help you get started. Go to Gipper.com. Don't forget to mention the podcast. That's Gipper.com. We want to say thanks to our good friends at Vital Signs Wall of Fame. If you're looking for a really cool way to display your school record board or your school's Hall of Fame, go to Vital Signs Wall of Fame and take a look at their interactive touch screen. That's right, touch screen video consoles. They're also a great way to tell your school's unique story and brag about your proudest moments. The website, once again, is vitalsignswalloffame.com. Don't forget to mention the podcast, vitalsignswalloffame.com. We also want to thank Huddle. As a football coach, I used Huddle for years, but when I became an athletic director, I made sure our school was a Huddle school, and our coaches just loved the tools that Huddle provided. Our student athletes loved the videos, our parents loved the streaming, but there is so much more. Go to huddle.com, join the 8 million users, and turn your school into a Huddle school. That's huddle.com. Welcome back, everybody, to the Educational AD Podcast. Once again, our guest is Jan Murphy, career coach and educator, and also the host of her own new podcast called the Title IX Time Machine. Jan, you took our listeners through your high school experience, incredible, starting that girls program, placing, getting into the state cross country tournament and coming home with a medal. What happened after college? I know you were a small town high school there in Oregon. What were your college next steps in college?
Well, I'm from a small town outside of Eugene, and I didn't want to go to the U of O because I wanted to move away from home. So I went to Oregon State. I walked on their cross country program. I think there were about 12 people on our team. Um, we did have a summer training clinic where we did some running and got to know each other. I do recall we had a publicity day where they, took our pictures and put us in some kind of posters and advertisements. Um, but we also didn't really have a coach. They had a woman that was the tennis coach to be the head coach, and then we had a graduate assistant that kind of ran with us. Um, but it wasn't very like in today's world, the kids know what the workouts are. It was very hodgepodge, put together kind of thing. When we went to meets, we all got stuffed in. I think we might have taken two vans. We had to go to the dining hall and get our sack lunch that our uh, meal plan paid for. Um, I do not ever recall being taken out to eat with the program, but I know we spent the night at least one time at the University of Washington. But other than that, we didn't have any perks. Um, on the other side of it, the men had their own dorm, they had their own dining hall, they had steak at night. And this was the era where when they really wanted that great basketball player, he got a new van. So there was a lot of discrepancies that we saw in sport at that time.
I love that. Obviously, you and I are about the same age. The star basketball player got a new van. For you younger listeners, back in the 70s, it was cool to have a van. That was what you drove around to be cool. Um, Now, Oregon State University, Division I program. I know, back in those days, basketball program was, national competitor. Football team struggled a little bit, but was there any observations? You kind of alluded to it, but so I'm going to pick that point. Was there any, observations or feelings from your teammates about, hey, how come they're getting all this stuff?
Discrepancies that I noticed. Um, if you ever had to go to athletic training, that very first year in whole time, we only had one athletic training office. And it was sort of like, well, the football players get to use that first. Cross country is a fall sport. And they were kind of mad, like, you guys can't take up our space. And there was a little bit of a dueling thing going on. They didn't like the girls um, interrupting their thought process. They're thinking it's football practice. We don't want to have them flirting with the girls before practice. Um, that definitely felt like was very unequal. And there were times when we were told, you can't come in here now. You can come back later, or basically, you're not on the football team. So this isn't important. And that became, I remember the athletic training department, that became a real contentious thing. And that was also, I believe, one of the first years that we had a girls' athletic training program. So there were women to treat women. And so those girls needed someone to work with.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
oh, go ahead. Okay. Now you were undergraduate, you were a PE health major, that was kind of your plan. Um, what was that end of the college experience like? Was it separate programs, men teacher candidates here, women teacher candidates here. Did you have women role models, at least in education?
Well, in terms of classes, I don't recall physical activity classes being um, co-ed until maybe in the summertime. There was a ballet class that they wanted the football players to take, and I think that was one co-ed class. And then we had that modern dance, folk dance kind of class we had to take, and that was co-ed. But most everything else was single sex. And I remember I took a weight training class, and in we had a women's building and a men's building, and they still do. And the men had classes in the men's building, women in the women's building, except the women's building had the ballroom dance, the building had the trampoline. There were a few things that we um, did together, but I had to take a weight training class in the men's building with a man who didn't want to have women in his building. And I can remember we've got Olympic plates, we're all doing bench press, and the smallest thing they have is a 45-pound bar. So I was a gymnast, so I was pretty strong, and I could bench press 100 pounds probably at that time, anyways. But most of the girls, they couldn't even pick up the bar, and it was like, okay, well, if you can't even lift these weights, you don't need to be in this class. Instead of where we're at now, oh, we'll get a 15-pound bar and a 30-pound bar until you get where you want to be. So there was a lot of let's make it hard. So I know I felt like this, and several other women felt like this, that the men wanted to make it hard, so we would quit. And that was a feeling most of the time I was in college for sports and some of those activities.
Yeah, boy, things hopefully they've changed, but hopefully they're changing and they're going to continue to change. Um, I had asked you earlier about role models. Were there any, women coaches, women instructors there that you can look back and say, hey, they, really helped me out, helped me get started?
I felt like most of my instructors were like that. You can imagine if you have a doctorate degree at a major university, you have probably had to push some boundaries to get where you are. And they were very encouraging about what do you want to do, how do you want to do it, um, giving advice. At that time, should you stay in school and get experience? Should you get your master's degree? We did lots of projects that were women centered. The one thing I think was really great is that because it was separate, I had lots of women role models that I could ask, how did you get this job? Why did you get this job? What were your experiences? What advice would you give? Where I wouldn't have got that probably from a male instructor.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's, and everybody needs that, men and women. We need those encouragers, those people to help us get started in our career. Let's go and take another quick break. One more time. Our guest today is Jan Murphy, Title IX pioneer, Title IX trailblazer. Let's take that break, but we're coming back. This is the Educational AD Podcast. We want to say thank you to Ohio University and their online masters in athletic administration. Now, I didn't get my master's from Ohio University, but my assistant athletic director did, along with thousands of others. And it was a great experience. It was very affordable, just 20 months, totally online. And while you earn your master's degree, you're also completing 11 NIAAA leadership training courses at no extra charge. To find out more information, just go to ohio.edu/info/MAA, the Ohio University Online Masters in Athletic Administration. We'd like to say thanks to Sideline Interactive, indoor score tables and video boards. Go to sidelineinteractive.com and you can schedule a live web demo to see their score tables and their score boards in action. Probably one of the best purchases I ever made was our Sideline Interactive indoor score table. Go to sidelineinteractive.com for more information. Sidelineinteractive.com. And we want to thank Hometown Ticketing. Hometown is the leading digital ticketing provider to schools and colleges. Whether it's more support, more security, or more customization, the Hometown team is going to help you make the best online ticketing solution. Go to hometownticketing.com. Don't forget to mention the podcast, hometownticketing.com. Welcome back to the Educational AD Podcast. Jan, you've taken us on your journey as a Title IX pioneer from a student athlete perspective, junior high, high school, and then college, Oregon State. Um, Now you're in the job market. It's a new decade, 1980s. What was that like? What was your job path during those still early years of Title IX?
Um, well, first of all, I graduated with a degree in physical education and to teach. And that was the year a whole bunch of teachers graduate from college, and it was very difficult to get a job. Um, my first couple of jobs were coaching jobs. I substitute taught, and I had to work, other jobs to make ends meet. When I finally uh, got a job, it was I had to wear a dress or skirt, nylons to my job, change when I got there into my PE clothes, teach my classes. At the end of the day, I had to put my attire back on to leave. And that was the first couple of years of my experience. And as I've interviewed other women, many of them have shared that same thing because women weren't allowed to wear shorts and pants to work, and men were. We just had to go with that same guideline. Um, getting a getting a job in the beginning, it was very difficult. It seemed like they had just hired somebody, or this happened or that happened. Um, I think I was very lucky after I had my first child. Uh, in the middle of nowhere, basically, there was a job. My husband and I went for the interview, and it just turned out that they needed a PE teacher, but they also were looking for a head football coach, which my husband was. So we were able to be hired together and work together. Um, and that school, for the most part, it felt okay. There were times when I really felt like, oh, you're not the man, so you can't do this. And one of those situations was I wasn't the head track coach because my husband, being the head track coach, would make more money. So he was the head track coach. I can remember um, I I taught with a guy that I actually turned out I went to school with. And we were talking about classes one day, and he said, "Yeah, I was in that class." And I said, "This fall, this semester?" He goes, "Yeah." And I go, "I never saw you." He goes, "Yeah, I never went. I was on the wrestling team, and they just gave us a test and gave us the answer." He got an A in a class he never attended, and I got a B. I think it was the dance class. Um, while I was at that school, I became pregnant with child number three, and my female principal called me in the office and told me, "I think it's time for you to stay home now. You have three kids, you have responsibilities." And at that time, it's not like I could call a lawyer and do discrimination, but I was really shocked and hurt. And I think that kind of behavior has hurt a lot of women going up because we already feel guilty, and I didn't need to have that uh, superior tell me I should stay home. So that wasn't a great experience for me. um, After that time, I needed to go back to school and finish my master's degree because to get your full-time teaching certificate, you've got to have so many hours. So that was a good experience going back to school. Um, and when I graduated, at that time, I was still pregnant. So I had to find a job while I was pregnant. That wasn't fun because, of course, no one wants to hire me. Men don't have to deal with that, do they? What's going to happen in 4 months or 5 months, that kind of thing. Um, so on that career path, there were a few things that were kind of upsetting. Can I tell a college story really quick?
Of
Um, I was
course.
in a
Yeah.
I was in a master's class, and I want to say there were 7 or 9 men and me. and it was kind of ethics or something like that. And it was taught by two females that were partners, and I couldn't get called on to save my life. And it was almost the opposite. Like they didn't want the men to think that they were going to call on me instead of them. And so they never called on me. It was kind of like reverse discrimination.
It's, wow. Um, Again, if this is the first time you're listening to our podcast, go back and listen to actually I think it's episode number 300. Here we are on episode number 614. Jan was episode number 300, and you can take a deeper dive into her career, which is a worthy listen. Jan, you had tremendous success as a head coach at the high school and at the college level, conference championships. You coached athletes that ended up representing their country in the Olympics. I think when I was looking at your bio, you've had something like 14 or 15 individual state champions in multiple states. You've been on committees. You are on the coaches advisory committee. Um, we talk about, whether it's breaking the ceiling or finding a seat at the table, getting into the room, that sort of thing. Um, what are some of your experiences at that upper level? I know there were sometimes you were the only woman in the room. Can you share one of those stories?
Um, well, I can. When I was at a NAIA college, my athletes, we had uniforms and that was it. We didn't have sweats, we didn't have tights. It was going to be 0 degrees for our conference meet. And I went to the athletic director and I was like, we need this, we need that. And he's like, what? No, you don't need tights. We didn't have tights. Um, and it was part joking, but again, if I had let it go, he would have just let it go. And I just said, no, if you're not going to do this, I'm going to have to go out and spend my own money because these kids cannot go to a meet without these things. And he relented, but it was always very difficult at that school. I also remember telling the president, I make like $8,000 less than everybody else in my position. And he said, okay, go get another job then. I mean, it was like no skin off his nose. You're not important. And that was also a feeling that happened a lot. Um, as I was moving through my career, I was a college coach, and with children, it was hard to do. So I went back to high school and I found myself in Florida where no one knew me, and I was the only woman in the room. And I was with all these men who went to college together, ran together, knew each other, and me. And it took, I want to say, a good 10 to 12 years before I wasn't the only woman in the room. And those men all would turn to me and say, what do you think? It took a very long time, but I was persistent and I didn't give up. And that's really the message that women have to take moving forward.
Moving forward, great transition to our next segment. We haven't had a chance to talk much about your podcast yet, and it's called the Title IX Time Machine, looking back and moving forward. I know you're already, 5 or 6 episodes deep into it. You've interviewed, coaches, athletic directors that are of that age. They grew up during Title IX and have their own stories, sometimes very similar to your stories. But you talk about, yeah, we're looking back, but we're also moving forward. What are some things that we all need to do moving forward for the second 50 years of Title IX? What are some of the things that your listeners have shared or your guests have shared, or what's your perspective? How do we all move forward and do a better job?
Well, I think in giving some advice, first of all, I would tell women, don't take no for an answer. Um, don't look at a job and say, oh, I'm not qualified for that, or I know 5 men that are going to apply and they'll get it instead of me. My husband always encouraged me to do it anyways, even if I thought I didn't have the right qualifications. It was good experience and I could see what they wanted. I applied for a job one time at a college, and I didn't even get an interview. And I called them up and I said, "Why didn't you interview me? Look at my experience. I see who you hired, and except for he's a man, we have the same experience." And they go, "Well, you weren't a GA." And I go, "It wasn't an option. How could I have an experience that wasn't available to me?" And I think another piece of advice in people hiring is to recognize that and not have that be an automatic check off. If you didn't do this, you're not eligible for this job because maybe that was not something that was available. Um, I also wanted to I forgot where I was. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Ask me another question.
Well, um, we are getting close to the end of this particular segment, but we're not done yet. We always wrap up with the athletic director or the coach's toolbox. So let's go and take a quick break. And when we come back, I'm going to challenge you to send out a brand new coach or a brand new athletic director, or a brand new leader on their very first job. But I'm only going to let you put 3 items in the toolbox. So let's take that break. And when we come back, we're going to see what Jan Murphy, Title IX pioneer, puts into her new leader toolbox. Before we go, we want to give a big thank you to Athletic Surveys by LifeTrack and thank them for sponsoring the AD Toolbox segment. Athletic directors already get feedback, but a lot of times it's from a very small group that only wants to complain. Athletic Surveys will connect you with that group, but they're also going to connect you with the 98% of your stakeholders that support your program. And having that positive feedback, that data, is incredibly valuable, especially when you're visiting with a frustrated parent, or maybe your principal, or even your school board. Go to athleticsurveys.com. They're going to create a custom survey that lets you take the pulse of everybody in your program. That's athleticsurveys.com. Well, it's that time of the podcast. We've been spending time with a friend of the show, Jan Murphy, a longtime coach, Title IX pioneer as an athlete, as a coach, as a leader, tremendous background in sports, and continuing to contribute to sports as the host of the new podcast, The Title IX Time Machine. Jan, we always wrap up our podcast with the athletic director, or in this case, it could be the coach or the leader toolbox. What are 3 tools that you would give to a brand new leader to help them get started?
Um, First of all, I want to say I think it would be important to have some kind of sponsor a Girls in Sports Day, Leadership Day. Maybe there's some experts in your area. You can have a luncheon. You can have a weekend conference and show girls how they can get ahead. And there are plenty of organizations out there to give you curriculum and ideas for what you could put in that. But by sponsoring that, it lets your school know it's important and it gives you a platform to share, like I have been sharing today. Um, the second thing, and I have found this in my career, and I want to be positive about it, but other women my age oftentimes weren't my best allies because I think they thought I was trying to steal something from them, take their job, whatever. There'll be plenty of opportunities. If this job didn't work out, there'll be other ones. And by networking and helping other women, you're making that available to them. Um, and the third thing, if you can do this, try to be a mentor. I know in sport organizations, in officiating organizations, in coaching programs and master's programs, they're looking for people to mentor someone that's new. And if you have the time and you want to provide just some advice, some of your experience for someone, being a mentor would really be a helpful solution for that, I think.
Oh, wow. Outstanding. The mentoring thing and the networking thing, tremendous. But I love the girls leadership program. We've had a number of people on the program before who do that sort of thing in their state. I think it's incredibly valuable. So thanks for sharing that. Also, real quick, um, Title IX Time Machine is the name of your podcast. Where can our listeners find it? How can they follow and listen?
You can follow and listen on Apple and Spotify platforms. I produce an episode just about every week. I might take a little break at Christmas. Um, and if you're interested in being on my podcast, please reach out. I am looking for people that have a Title IX experience they would like to share. It's Jan P. Murphy at gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram and X, and you can message me there, and then we can continue the conversation through that introduction.
And I think you're also on LinkedIn, right?
I'm on LinkedIn.
Yeah. So, Title IX Time Machine, it's on Spotify, it's on Apple, it's probably on just about any podcast platform you want to listen to. Title IX Time Machine, looking back, moving forward. And again, that email address, correct me if I'm wrong, Jan P. Murphy at gmail.com. Did I get it?
That's correct.
Well, Jan, thanks again for sharing. All the best with the podcast. Listeners, we're going to start posting Jan's episodes one at a time, probably after the first of the year as part of our Thursday rotation. We've got a brand new series, I guess, of podcast segments, and Title IX Time Machine is going to be one of them. So if you click on the link that's on my podcast on Thursdays, it'll take you directly to Jan's podcast on Spotify. Jan, thanks for sharing, and all the best.
All right. Thanks very much. Looking forward to seeing you in Austin.
And looking forward to seeing all of our listeners in Austin. We hope you're there. Just a reminder, we upload the Zoom recordings of all of our interviews to the Educational AD Podcast YouTube channel. We do this just about every day. We share stories and best practices. So hopefully you'll come back and join us again for the next episode of the Educational AD Podcast. Thanks again for listening.